For 1,000 years the mountains of Asgard had slept beneath the shadow of a legend. The peaks clawed at the heavens, wreathed in perpetual storms, and at their heart lay a wound in the world, a vast crater lined with obsidian glass and molten veins of once-living rock. That wound was the tomb of the Dragon Queen. None dared to go there, not even the dragons. The stories said her wrath still lingered, coiled in the bones of the mountain itself. She had been the greatest of her kind, Aurelia, the world flame, crowned in fire, wings vast enough to blot out the sun. She had burned kings from their thrones, drowned empires in storms of molten gold, and finally fallen, betrayed, it was whispered, by her own kin, slain not by mortals, but by envy. They entombed her in the crater where she fell, sealing her away with runes of fire and stone, and then swore never to return. And so, for centuries, the tomb slept. The wind howled through its jagged mouth, the storms screamed above, and the mountain burned with silent, simmering hatred. Whole generations lived and died in the valleys below, warning their children to never look upon the peaks, never speak the queen's name after sunset. Then one day, a child climbed the mountain. It began with a dare. Her name was Lyra, and she was small even for a human child, thin-armed, freckled, with wind-tangled hair the color of straw. Her village sat at the edge of the Ashen Vale, where the grass never grew right and the air smelled faintly of sulfur. They were a hard people, mountain folk, poor but proud, and they had their stories. Every night the elders would speak of the Dragon Queen, of her fury, her death, and the curse that followed. And every night Lyra would listen, wide-eyed, a little afraid, but mostly fascinated. It wasn't the horror that gripped her. It was the silence afterward, the way even the fire seemed to dim when Aurelia's name was spoken. The fear tasted like something unfinished, something that had never been understood. So when the older children mocked her, calling her moth-brained dreamer for believing dragons were more than monsters, she spat right back and said, "Then I'll ask her myself." They laughed, of course, but the mountain didn't. The next morning, before dawn, Lyra packed a loaf of bread, a cracked waterskin, and her father's old knife. She left a note on the hearthstone, though she couldn't spell well enough to say much more than "gone-looking." Then she wrapped herself in her wool cloak and walked toward the mountains. The climb was brutal. The air thinned, the rocks cut her hands, and the cold gnawed through her bones. Clouds closed in, black and heavy, and thunder rolled like distant roars. But she didn't turn back. Every time her legs trembled, she thought of the old stories, the queen's golden scales, the sound of her wings breaking the sky, the way the earth had glowed where her claws had struck. She wanted to see it. Not the legend, not the warning, but the truth. When she reached the ridge, the storm broke, lightning flashed, carving the mountain in white fire. Wind screamed around her, and she saw, at last, the great wound in the earth. The tomb of the Dragon Queen stretched before her like the mouth of a god, a crater a mile across, glowing faintly from deep within, its edges lined with glass and black stone. The air shimmered with heat, though snow fell all around, and the ground trembled as if remembering something vast. Lyra stared, trembling, not from fear, but awe. The wind tasted like ashes and gold. She walked down. Each step closer made her heart pound harder. The stones grew warm, then hot. Symbols, faint as scars, burned through the glass. Runes older than kingdoms, etched by fire and sealed with dragon blood. She couldn't read them, but somehow she understood. They were not warnings, but promises, and they thrummed with a faint heartbeat, steady and deep, as though the mountain itself was breathing. Halfway down, she slipped. Her hand caught a shard of obsidian, slicing her palm open. Blood dripped onto the glass and hissed, curling into smoke. The mountain shuddered. A low sound rolled through the air, soft, almost a sigh. The heat flared, and for a heartbeat she thought she saw eyes, vast and distant, open in the dark below. She froze, clutching her bleeding hand to her chest. Then the sound faded. Lyra swallowed hard. Her heart thundered, but she didn't run. She looked down at the crater floor. There, at its center, lay a black dome of stone split with golden cracks. The tomb. Her throat felt tight. The air was too hot to breathe. But she walked forward anyway. When she reached the dome, she lifted her small fist, trembling, and knocked once, twice, 3 times. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the world split open. The ground cracked, lightning shot through the glass, and a roar like the birth of the world shook the air. The mountains screamed. The clouds above tore apart, and Lyra was thrown backward by a wave of heat so fierce it burned the edge of her cloak to ash. From the fissures in the dome poured light, molten gold, flowing like veins of living fire. The runes on the ground flared to life, spiraling outward in concentric rings, and the air filled with a sound that was not a voice but something older, deeper, a hum that made her bones vibrate. Lyra staggered to her feet, eyes wide, face lit by the glow. The fissures widened. The stone shell split apart, revealing beneath it something vast and terrible. A shape coiled upon itself, scales like mirrors of sunlight, wings folded close, claws as long as trees. The Dragon Queen. Even dead, or sleeping, she was magnificent. Her body was half encased in rock, half carved from it. Her wings fused with the mountain, her eyes closed. Smoke curled faintly from between her teeth, each exhale a sigh of molten breath. Around her neck was a collar of black iron, sunk deep into the scales, its runes pulsing faintly with crimson light. Lyra could only stare. She had never imagined beauty could be so fearsome. The Dragon Queen's scales shimmered with light even in death, and her presence pressed down like a storm, vast and ancient. Then, softly, a whisper filled the air. "Who knocks?" The voice wasn't sound. It was pressure. A thought pressed directly into her skull. It was heavy and slow, like a mountain trying to remember what language was. Lyra's knees buckled. She wanted to run, to scream, but her lips moved before her mind caught up. "Me," she said weakly. "Lyra," a pause. The air thickened. The golden eyes opened. They were suns, endless and old, burning with memories that could shatter minds. Lyra felt herself unravel under that gaze, as if every lie, every fear, every heartbeat she'd ever had was being turned over, examined, weighed. Then, softly, almost like wonder, the voice came again. Human. Child. Her name echoed in the stones, in the air, in her blood. She couldn't tell if she was hearing or dreaming. The dragon's head shifted, a slow grinding of stone on stone. The mountain trembled. "Why, do you wake me?" Lyra swallowed hard. Her throat was dry. She tried to think, but all she could say was the truth. "I wanted to know," she whispered. "If you were real." A sound rolled from the dragon's chest. Not quite a growl, not quite laughter. A tired, ancient sound. The queen's gaze softened. If such a thing was possible for something that could burn the sky. Real. The voice drifted as though tasting the word. "Yes, once I was real." The mountain went still again. The glow dimmed slightly. Lyra stepped forward, her bare feet leaving bloody prints on the hot stone. "What happened to you?" she asked. The air grew heavier. For a long moment the dragon did not answer. Then her voice came, low and hollow. "Betrayal. My kin feared what they could not rule. They bound me in chains of their own fire, sealed my heart in the mountain they stole. I dreamed of freedom, but only death answered." Her eyes closed again. "I dreamed for centuries." Lyra's hands shook. She didn't understand all of it, but she could hear the sorrow in the dragon's voice, the kind that lived too long. "That's not fair," she said softly. The dragon's eyes opened again, faintly amused. "Fairness," she murmured, "is a dream for the small. The strong take what they will." "Then they weren't strong enough to face you fair," Lyra said. Her voice was trembling but steady. "They cheated." The faintest flicker of gold light passed through the dragon's gaze. Interest, perhaps, or memory. "You have fire," the queen said. "A spark of the old kind." Lyra blinked. "Old kind?" "The kind who looked at gods and did not bow." The mountain trembled again, deeper this time. The collar around the dragon's throat glowed brighter, crimson light pulsing faster. She grimaced, a low growl shaking the stones. Lyra stumbled back, frightened.
Are you hurt?
Always, the queen whispered. It binds me still. I am dead, yet not gone. My heart burns, but my wings are stone. Lyra hesitated. Then she took a shaky breath and stepped closer. The heat was unbearable now. Her cloak smoldered, her hair stuck to her face with sweat. She raised her small hands toward the iron collar. Can I help? The queen stared at her for a long, long moment. You are mortal, she said finally. You are fragile. You cannot bear the weight of my chains. Lyra's hand trembled. Maybe, but nobody else came. The words hung between them, fragile as breath. Then, slowly, the queen's great head bowed. Then you are the first, she said softly, to knock upon a tomb and speak with the dead. Lyra smiled faintly, even through the heat. Then maybe you're not dead anymore. The dragon's eyes gleamed. The collar pulsed again, then flickered, as if the magic binding it had shivered. If only for a heartbeat. The mountain whispered, deep and low, and for the first time in 1,000 years, the Dragon Queen smiled. The next morning never came. There was no dawn in the tomb of the Dragon Queen, only a strange twilight born from the molten light beneath the earth. The storm above never broke, thunder rolling endlessly like a heartbeat, and the mountain itself pulsed with warmth that wasn't quite life. Lyra woke, or thought she did, curled against a shard of rock that glowed faintly from the queen's fire. Her limbs ached, her throat burned, and every breath tasted of ash and metal. Yet when she looked up and saw those golden eyes still open, she forgot the pain. The queen watched her silently, unmoving, her massive head resting against the stone. Smoke curled from her nostrils in lazy ribbons, carrying the scent of scorched gold and ancient dust. Lyra felt tiny before her, a candle before a star, but the dragon's gaze no longer burned. It was patient, curious, alive. Are you real? Lyra whispered, her voice hoarse. Or am I dreaming still? The queen's chest rumbled. It wasn't a laugh. It was deeper, older, like mountains shifting beneath oceans. Dreams do not ache as you do, little spark. Lyra smiled faintly. Then you are real. For now, the queen said. But even real things fade. Her eyes flicked to the collar of black iron around her throat, runes pulsing with dull red light. This binds me still. My heart is chained. My wings are the mountain. My fire is my prison. Lyra looked at the iron, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to move when she tried to look straight at them. Who did this? She asked softly. My kin, the queen murmured. The lesser flames. They feared what I became. I was born of the first fire, the flame that breathed the stars. They were born from me, but envy is sharper than fangs. They called it balance. I called it betrayal. Lyra's brow furrowed. Then where are they now? Scattered, the queen said, voice fading like wind over coals. Hiding in the clouds, sleeping in the oceans. None would dare come near this place. Even their gods avoid it. Her eyes drifted back to Lyra. But you came. Lyra shifted uncomfortably under that gaze. I wanted to know what was true, she said. Everyone says you were evil, that you burned the world, that you made the sky bleed. The dragon's nostrils flared. A tremor ran through the ground. They remember the ashes, not the fire that came before. I burned because I loved too fiercely. I defended what they sought to chain. But mortals never see beyond the flame. They see only what it destroys. Lyra bit her lip. I see you, she said softly. And you don't look evil. The queen tilted her massive head, golden eyes narrowing slightly. You do not fear me. I'm afraid, Lyra admitted. But that doesn't mean I'll run. A low hum filled the air, a sound almost like approval. There was a time when mortals spoke thus, the queen said, when they built towers of glass to touch the stars, when they forged steel that sang and wrote words that outlived their bones. Humans were fire once, but now they hide beneath stones and tell ghost stories. Lyra felt her face grow warm. Maybe we forgot, she said, but we still try. The queen studied her for a long moment. Then she said quietly, perhaps you will remember again. For a while, neither spoke. The light from the queen's scales pulsed softly, casting the chamber in shifting gold. Lyra found herself tracing the patterns in the glass beneath her feet, runes and spirals she couldn't read but somehow felt in her bones. They hummed faintly when she brushed her fingers over them. It was a strange kind of music, deep and sad. "Why does it still hurt?" Lyra asked suddenly, glancing at the collar. "If you're—" She hesitated. "If you're dead." The queen's lips curled faintly. "Death is not absence. It is a silence that waits to be broken. My body sleeps, but my heart remains bound. When your blood touched the seal, the silence cracked." Lyra looked at her bleeding palm, now scabbed over. "I didn't mean to wake you," she said. You knocked," the queen finished. "And that was enough." Lyra frowned. "But why me?" The queen's gaze flicked downward. "Because you did what even dragons feared. You sought truth where there was terror. You looked at the tomb and did not turn away. There is power in defiance, little spark. It is the first flame of every world." Lyra felt something twist inside her chest. A flicker of pride, perhaps, or wonder. "If I broke your silence," she said slowly, "can I break your chains too?" The dragon's eyes dimmed, and the heat around her softened. "You would burn," she said. "Your heart is too small for such fire." "Maybe," Lyra said. "But if I could, would it set you free?" The queen was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than the crackle of embers. "Freedom is not without cost. My fire would not stay still. It would remake the world as I once did. The skies would burn anew. The seas would boil. Mortals would curse my name again." Lyra frowned. "Then what's the point of freedom if it just hurts everyone?" "Because to burn is to be alive," the queen said simply, "and to live is to change what lies around you." Lyra didn't know how to answer that. She sat there, hugging her knees, watching the light from the dragon's scales flicker like candlelight on water. Somewhere deep below, molten rivers murmured. The storm above roared again, echoing through the crater like distant drums. After a while, she said quietly, "You sound lonely." The queen's eyes softened. "The fire that births stars burns alone." Lyra hesitated, then reached out and touched the edge of one vast, gleaming claw. It was warm, almost alive beneath her fingers. The queen didn't pull away. "You don't have to be," Lyra whispered. The dragon blinked slowly. "Mortals die. I will not." "Then you'll remember me," Lyra said. "That's enough." The queen stared at her for a long, silent moment. Then the faintest curl of smoke rose from her nostrils. A sigh. "You remind me," she murmured, "of the first of your kind I ever met, the ones who came before kings and crowns. They spoke to us not as gods, but as equals. They carried iron hearts and curious eyes." Lyra smiled faintly. "Maybe that's still in us somewhere." "Perhaps," the queen said. "If the world allows it to live." She shifted slightly, a movement that sent tremors through the ground. The runes beneath Lyra's feet flared brighter, and for a heartbeat she saw shapes in the light. Dragons flying over oceans of fire, men and women walking beside them, towers made of crystal and flame. A world before fear. Then the vision faded, leaving only the endless glow. Lyra blinked tears from her eyes. "That was real?" "It was," the queen said, "until it was not." "Can it be again?" The dragon was silent for a long time. "Fire can always be rekindled," she said at last, "but the kindling must choose to burn." Lyra looked at her hand again. The scar from the glass had stopped bleeding, but faint lines of gold now traced the wound, shimmering softly under her skin. "Is that you?" she asked, frightened and awed. The queen's eyes flickered. "A spark," she said. "You carry it now." Lyra stared at her palm. "What does it mean?" "It means," the queen said, "that your heart knows my flame. You are tied to my fire. You may see what others fear, or you may be destroyed by it." Lyra swallowed hard. "That doesn't sound good." The queen gave a low rumble that might have been laughter. "All true things are dangerous." For hours, or perhaps minutes, time no longer felt right in that place. They spoke. Lyra asked questions no one else had dared ask. Why dragons hid from the world? Why mortals feared what they didn't understand? why the fire that gave life could also take it away. The queen answered as best she could, her words heavy as stone, but always touched with something that felt almost like regret. At last, Lyra's eyes grew heavy. The warmth lulled her, soft as a lullaby. She curled up beside one of the queen's claws and drifted to sleep. The dragon watched her for a long while, silent. When Lyra woke again, the world had changed. The light was dimmer, the air colder. The queen's eyes were closed. The ground shivered beneath her feet, and faint red cracks spread through the runes on the floor. Lyra sat up quickly. "Aurelia?" she whispered. The dragon stirred faintly. "The seal weakens," she said, voice thick with effort. "Your blood. It wakes what was buried." Lyra's stomach twisted. "Is that bad?" "For you. Perhaps not. For the world." The queen's voice trailed off. "If I rise again, the balance breaks." Lyra stood, trembling. "Then I'll help you fix it." The dragon's lips curved faintly. "You would mend the sky?" "I'd try," Lyra said fiercely. "Someone has to." The queen looked at her for a long time. "Then go," she said softly. "Find the others. The ones who bound me. They still breathe, though they hide behind mortal masks. Their fire burns cold now, but they will know my name. Tell them the tomb stirs." Lyra blinked. "Others? You mean dragons?" The queen's eyes flared faintly. "Yes, some walk as beasts, some as men, but all will remember the sound of my voice. If they have hearts left to hear." Lyra's pulse quickened. The thought of leaving her was unbearable. "What if they hurt me?" "Then burn brighter," the queen said simply. "The spark I gave you will answer when you call." The mountain rumbled again, louder this time. Dust rained from the ceiling and the iron collar flared crimson. Aurelia's claws dug into the stone. "Go, Lyra," she hissed. "The chains rage at your touch." Lyra hesitated, tears burning her eyes. "Will I see you again?" The dragon's gaze softened. "If you survive. If the fire chooses you." Lyra bit her lip, nodded once, and turned to climb the shattered slope. The heat seared her back. The wind screamed in her ears, but she didn't look away. She climbed until the glow faded, until she felt cold air again, until the storm swallowed the mountain's heart behind her. When she reached the ridge, she turned back, and for a moment, she thought she saw the dragon's eyes looking up through the clouds, golden and unblinking. Then the crater was dark again. Lyra stumbled down the mountain through the storm. Each step burned. Her veins felt alive with fire. The scar on her hand glowed faintly beneath the snow. Somewhere behind her, deep in the tomb, the last of the seals cracked like thunder, and in her small human chest, a spark began to grow. Snow fell like ash across the ashen veil. It drifted in silent sheets, covering the broken earth and the blackened stumps of trees that had never grown right since the old wars. Lyra moved through it like a shadow, her cloak torn, her face wind-burned, her eyes sharper than they had ever been. The scar on her palm still glowed faintly beneath the wrappings she'd tied around it. It pulsed sometimes, like a heartbeat, or a whisper reminding her she wasn't entirely alone. She hadn't told anyone where she'd gone or what she'd seen. The villagers wouldn't have believed her. They would have called her cursed or mad, or worse, a liar who spoke the Dragon Queen's name out loud. So she walked alone, following the whisper in her blood, the strange tug that pulled her north, toward the high valleys, where the sky broke open over frozen rivers. Days passed, and she barely felt them. She dreamed often of the tomb, of Aurelia's eyes glowing in the dark, of her voice echoing through stone. Sometimes she woke to find her breath steaming gold in the cold air, her heartbeat thrumming in rhythm with something far older. The spark within her was changing her. She could sense things now, the hum of the earth, the low ache of thunder before it came, even the faint flicker of life inside the stones. It frightened her at first. Then she began to listen. It was on the 7th day that she met the first of them. The man appeared at dusk, when the light was thin and red. He was sitting by a river that steamed despite the cold, sharpening a blade that glowed faintly blue. He looked human at first glance, a wanderer, rough-bearded, wrapped in furs. But when Lyra approached, the air changed. It grew heavier, like the moments before lightning strikes. His eyes lifted to hers, and they were slit like a serpent's. "You should not be here," he said. His voice was low, ancient. It carried weight. Lyra stopped a few paces away. "Are you one of them?" The man's eyes narrowed. "One of what?" "Dragons," she said simply. "The Queen sent me." The man froze. The blade slipped from his fingers and hissed when it hit the snow. For a heartbeat the air burned. Then he stood, slow and careful, studying her. "You speak dangerous words, child." "She's awake," Lyra said. "Not alive, not yet. But she's waking." He took a step toward her, his expression unreadable. "That cannot be." The chains hold. "The seals were forged from her own flame." "She said they're breaking," Lyra said. "She told me to find you." For a long moment the man said nothing. Then his eyes glowed faintly and steam rose from his skin, as if the fire beneath could no longer stay buried. "Her spark burns in you," he murmured. "I smell it." Lyra tensed. "If you try to hurt me—" He raised a hand. "I will not. You are already marked." "What does that mean?" she asked. "That you are her voice now," he said softly, "and that your life will never again be your own." He turned away, staring out over the steaming river. "Once I was called Kael, in the old tongue Flameborn. I served her, before the betrayal. I helped bind her." Lyra stepped closer. "Why?" "Because I believed she would destroy us all," he said. "We feared her fire. We feared what she became. And perhaps we were right. But fear does not forgive. The world has forgotten her name, yet we remember. We have carried the guilt like ash." Lyra's heart thudded. "Then help me free her." Kael turned sharply. "Do you know what you ask? If she rises, the sky burns. Empires will fall. The balance will break. She deserves the chance to choose," Lyra said. "You took that from her." The dragon man's jaw tightened. "You speak like a child." "I am a child," she said. "And I'm not afraid." Kael stared at her for a long time, and something like sorrow flickered behind his eyes. "You should be," he said. They camped together that night beneath a broken arch of stone. The wind screamed above them, but the air around Kael shimmered faintly with heat. Lyra asked him questions. About Aurelia, about the dragons who had once ruled the skies, about why they vanished. "There were 13 of us left when the Queen fell," he said, staring into the flames. "We thought killing her would save us from her madness. But it only cursed us. Our wings turned to smoke. Our fire faded. Some took mortal form and forgot what they were. Others drowned themselves in oceans or slept beneath mountains, too ashamed to wake. Can they be found?" Lyra asked. "Some, perhaps, but they will not thank you for reminding them of their sins." "I have to try," she said. "She told me to find them." Kael's gaze softened. "You carry her spark. It will call to them whether you wish it or not. But be warned, her fire is hunger. It consumes what it touches." "I trust her," Lyra said simply. Kael looked at her, and for the first time he almost smiled. "Then may the flame favor you." They traveled together after that, through frozen passes and black forests where the trees whispered like ghosts. Sometimes Kael would shift, just slightly. His eyes would blaze gold, his skin shimmer with faint scales, and his shadow would stretch behind him like wings. Lyra never asked him to hide it. She liked the reminder that dragons still walked the world. It was Kael who first noticed the signs. The scorched tracks in the snow, the smell of ozone and burnt stone. Something was hunting them. "She's not the only one stirring," he said grimly one morning. "If the Queen wakes, others will feel it. The world remembers its masters." Lyra frowned. "You mean dragons?" "No," Kael said. "Something older. The ones who taught even us to fear." That night Lyra dreamed of fire and chains. She saw Aurelia roaring against the sky, wings torn, blood falling like molten gold. Around her circled 12 other dragons, their faces hard, their eyes full of sorrow. When she woke, the snow around their camp was blackened in a perfect circle. A day later, the sky split. They were crossing a narrow pass when the air turned electric. The clouds above twisted into spirals, glowing red from within. Kael froze. "Run!" he hissed. But it was too late. The creature descended in silence, a vast shape of smoke and silver. its wings like torn storm clouds, its eyes burning white. It wasn't flesh, but flame given form, flickering and flickering as if it couldn't decide what it was. Lyra felt her knees buckle beneath its gaze. "Kyle," it said, voice like thunder rolling through glass. "You have broken your oath." Kyle stepped forward, his human face hardening. "Ver," he said, "I did not summon her. She came of her own will." The thing, Ver, turned its gaze upon Lyra. "A mortal carrying the Queen's fire? Blasphemy!" "She's just a child," Kale shouted. "No," Ver said coldly. "She is a spark, and sparks become wildfires." He opened his jaws, and light gathered, pure, searing flame. Lyra screamed, throwing up her hands, and the world exploded. Golden fire burst from her palms, roaring up to meet Ver's silver flame. The shockwave shattered the mountainside, flinging Kale to the ground. Snow turned to steam, rocks melted to glass, and Lyra felt her body burn from the inside out. She didn't understand what she was doing. She only felt. The spark within her had become a storm. When the light faded, Ver was gone. Only a black scar remained, smoking faintly against the sky. Lyra collapsed. When she woke, Kyle was kneeling beside her, his hands glowing faintly as he pressed them to her chest. "You're alive," he muttered. "By the stars, you shouldn't be." Lyra blinked at him, dazed. Did I kill him?" Kale's face was pale. "You burned his soul to cinders," he said softly. "No mortal could do that. Not even I could." She looked down at her hands. The scars blazed bright gold. "I didn't mean to." "I know," Kyle said. "But now they will all know where you are." That night, they didn't light a fire. They didn't sleep. Kyle spoke in hushed tones of the other dragons. Of Eris, who slept beneath the sands. Of Thalon, who wore a king's crown in the east. Of Solenia, who had gone mad and turned her fire inward. Lyra listened, memorizing every name. "They will come for you," Kyle warned. "Some to kill you, others to worship you. The Queen's fire divides. It always has." Lyra stared into the darkness. "Then I'll make them listen. All of them." Kyle's expression softened with something like pity. "You sound like her." "Good," Lyra said. "She deserves someone who does." By dawn, they reached the edge of the veil again. Below them lay a land scarred by centuries of fear, a place where no one remembered dragons except in curses. Lyra stood there, wind tearing at her cloak, and felt the pulse in her hand grow stronger. She could almost hear Aurelia's voice in the wind, faint and distant. "The fire wakes." Kyle placed a hand on her shoulder. "What will you do now?" Lyra looked toward the horizon, where thunder rolled like footsteps. "Find them," she said. "All of them. And when they come—" She clenched her fist, golden light spilling between her fingers. "Why, we'll finish what they started." Far behind them, deep in the mountains, something vast shifted. The earth groaned. A sound like a heartbeat echoed across the land. And in the tomb of the Dragon Queen, molten light poured from the cracks once more. The world was beginning to remember its fire. The storm came down from the north, riding on thunder and wings. Villages scattered across the vale saw it first. Black clouds spiraling like smoke, lightning flickering gold. The air trembling with a sound that wasn't wind. Farmers dropped their tools, mothers pulled children indoors, old men fell to their knees muttering prayers older than their gods. They all said the same thing later, that the mountain had awakened, that the Dragon Queen had opened her eyes, and that something in the world had changed. Lyra felt it long before she saw it. The spark in her hand flared so hot it burned through the wrappings. She woke in the night gasping, her heart racing with a rhythm that wasn't hers. Kale was already standing at the edge of their camp, staring toward the horizon where the storm boiled. His expression was grim. "She rises," he said. Lyra swallowed. "Aurelia?" Kyle nodded. "The seals are gone. Your fire broke them." For a long moment, neither spoke. The air itself seemed to hum, every breath alive with energy. Lyra felt it in her bones. The pull, the promise, the terrifying, beautiful heat that wanted to consume everything. She didn't know if it was Aurelia calling her or something greater. All she knew was that she had to go back. Kale tried to stop her. You don't understand what's waking, he said. When she rises, the world burns again. The old balance will shatter. The gods themselves will tremble. Then let them, Lyra said. The world has been asleep too long. He stared at her, pain flickering in his eyes. She'll use you, Lyra. The queen's fire doesn't give. It takes. I don't believe that, she said quietly. I've seen her heart. She's not just rage, she's lonely. Cal looked away. So was I once. They traveled back to the mountain in silence. The sky grew darker each day, clouds twisting in impossible patterns. Rivers boiled, the air shimmered with heat even in the dead of winter, and the birds fled south in flocks so thick they blotted out the sun. The closer they got, the louder the earth became. Every step seemed to echo with a heartbeat that belonged to something vast and ancient. When they reached the Ashen Vale, it was no longer ash. It was fire. Rivers of molten light cut through the earth where once there had been stone. The mountain glowed red from within, its slopes trembling as if trying to breathe. Cale stopped at the ridge, his human form trembling, scales rippling under his skin. This is madness, he said. She will break the sky. Lyra stood beside him, the wind whipping her hair, her hand burning gold. Then let's make something new from the pieces. She started climbing. Each step was agony. The air scalded her lungs, and her feet bled where the ground had turned to glass. The storm screamed above, lightning carving the peaks in white fire. Cale followed, half-shifted now, his wings flickering between shadow and flame. When they reached the crater, the sight stole even his breath. The tomb was gone. Where the black dome had stood was now a lake of fire, and from its center rose the queen. She was enormous, vaster than the mountain itself, her wings unfolding in slow, terrible grace. The air around her shimmered with heat so fierce the snow on distant peaks melted. Her scales blazed like molten gold, her eyes twin suns. When she exhaled, the clouds fled. Aurelia was awake. Lyra fell to her knees. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The sight was too much, too beautiful, too vast. But when the queen's gaze found her, the world seemed to still. Little spark, Aurelia said, her voice rolling across the mountains like thunder made of silk. You returned. Lyra forced herself to stand. You told me to find them, she said. I found one, Cale. The dragon's gaze shifted. When it fell upon Cale, he dropped to one knee instinctively, his body trembling. My queen, he whispered. Forgive me. Forgive? Aurelia's tone was neither cruel nor kind. It was weary. You bound me, Cale Flameborn. You caged your fire in fear. Tell me, do you still fear it? Kyle bowed his head. Every day. The queen studied him for a long moment. Then she lowered her massive head until her eyes filled the sky before him. Then you are wiser than you were, she said softly. Fear is not weakness, it is memory. Rise, my lost son. Kyle lifted his head, awe and grief mingling in his face. You would forgive us? I forgave you long ago, she said. It was myself I could not forgive. Lyra stepped closer, the heat forcing her to shield her face. The others are still out there, she said. They need to hear you. The queen's eyes flared. They will. The fire calls to all who once burned. A tremor rolled through the ground. Across the horizon, pillars of light erupted, one after another, piercing the clouds. Lyra felt their power in her blood. The other dragons were waking. Kyle's face went pale. You've started it, he said. The flame convergence. The last time this happened, the seas boiled for 100 years. The queen's wings unfolded fully now, blotting out the sky. Then let the world remember its birthright, she said. Let it burn away the rot of fear. No, Lyra shouted. The word tore from her throat, small but fierce. The queen paused. Lyra stepped forward, trembling. You can't destroy it. You said the fire was life. You said it changes what it touches. Don't burn it all down, change it. The queen's gaze turned on her, vast and unreadable. You speak to me as if I am mortal. You were once, Lyra said. You cared. You loved. You mourned. You're more than destruction. You're creation too. I felt it when you gave me the spark. Silence. Then softly the queen spoke. You would teach me mercy? I'd remind you, Lyra said. For a moment it seemed the world itself held its breath. Then the queen lowered her head, until Lyra stood before an eye the size of a lake, golden light washing over her. "You are bold," Aurelia murmured, "as all true flames are." She extended a single claw. "Then show me, Spark. Show me what mercy burns like." Lyra hesitated only a moment before stepping forward. She pressed her glowing hand to the claw, and the world vanished in light. Fire filled her veins. Not pain, power. She saw through Aurelia's eyes, through the memories of ages. She saw the first dawn, when dragons were born from the breath of stars. She saw them soaring beside the first humans, not as gods but as kin. She saw their fall, their pride, their fear, the day Aurelia's heart broke when her fire was turned against her. And beneath it all, she felt sorrow, endless, ancient, patient sorrow. Lyra reached for it. "You don't have to be alone anymore," she whispered. "Let me help you," the fire roared. Kale shouted her name, but she didn't hear. Her body lifted from the ground, wreathed in gold. The queen's light flared brighter, spilling over the mountains, the valleys, the world. The storm broke, not in destruction, but in rain. Warm, golden rain. Aurelia's roar split the sky, but it was not rage. It was release. When the light faded, the mountain was still. The molten lake had cooled to crystal, glowing faintly from within. The storm clouds were gone, leaving a sky the color of new dawn. Lyra lay on the stone, her cloak burned away, her hand dim and dark. Kale knelt beside her, shaking. "Lyra," he whispered. "By the stars, what have you done?" A shadow fell over them. The queen was smaller now, not gone but changed. Her wings shimmered with light, translucent as flame. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, almost human. "She showed me the other fire," Aurelia said. "The one that warms instead of burns." Kyle stared up at her. "You spared the world?" Aurelia looked down at Lyra, her eyes filled with something that might have been love. "No," she said softly. "She did." Lyra stirred, her eyelids fluttering. "Did it work?" she whispered. The queen smiled, her vast form rippling like heat over water. "The balance is reborn. The world will remember light, not only flame." Lyra's hand glowed faintly again, softer now, gentle. "Will you stay?" she asked. "I will sleep once more," Aurelia said. "Not as a prisoner, but as a guardian. My fire will live through you, Spark-bearer. Wherever you walk, the dragons will know peace is possible again." Kale bowed deeply. "Then the age of fear is over." The queen's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the other pillars of light had begun to fade. "No," she said. "Fear never dies, but it can learn to kneel." She spread her wings, and the air shimmered. The heat that had once burned the land now rolled outward as warmth, melting snow, awakening green shoots from the ashes. She looked once more at Lyra. "Remember," she said, "even the smallest flame can guide the lost through the dark." Then she rose. Her wings caught the sunlight, scattering it like fire through glass, and with one final roar that shook the heavens, she vanished into the clouds. Silence followed. Real silence. The first peaceful wind the mountains had felt in 1,000 years. Kale lifted Lyra gently. She was still weak, her body trembling, but her eyes shone brighter than the dawn. Below them, the veil was no longer ashen. The earth smoked softly, gold light running like veins through the soil. The first flowers in centuries broke through the melted snow. "Is she gone?" Lyra asked. Kyle looked up at the sky, where faint golden trails lingered. "No," he said. "She's everywhere now." Lyra smiled faintly. The scar on her palm glowed once more, not burning this time, just warm, like a heartbeat answering another, far away. They descended the mountain together. Everywhere they went, people whispered of strange things. Rivers that glowed at night, fires that didn't burn, dreams of wings spreading over the stars. The world was healing, remembering. Months later, in the heart of spring, Lyra stood alone on a hill overlooking her village. Children ran through the grass that had once been gray. The wind smelled clean, alive. She lifted her hand to the sun, watching the faint golden shimmer under her skin. "Still with me?" she whispered. Far above, a shadow crossed the sky. Vast, graceful, silent. For an instant, the sunlight turned to gold. Lyra smiled. The Dragon Queen had not vanished. She had simply become the flame that lived in every sunrise, every heart brave enough to seek truth where others saw fear. And as Lyra turned toward the world waiting to be remade, she whispered words that would one day become legend. No one dared approach the Dragon Queen's tomb until a human child knocked, and the world learned to burn again.